Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast presented by BuckeyeHuddle.com. I am Marc Givler, joined by Alex Gleitman today. We've got a lot to kind of digest, kind of an interesting visitor weekend for Ohio State. Lots of goings on elsewhere around the country as well that didn't involve the visit weekend that we need to kind of dive into as well. We're going to jump into all that here. Where to start? I guess we'll start with Ohio State and the visit weekend they just came off of. Arion Carter, four-star linebacker out of Memphis, made his scheduled official visit. Things seem to be going pretty well there. Huge, I think, moment in that recruiting process. We've talked about before how Ohio State's been aware of him for the last maybe 2 months, but that the relationships have been, slowly building up to this visit and just kind of needing to get him on campus, get him around the team. Alex, kind of where do you have this now coming out of the official visit? And, is Ohio State, maybe a top 2 team here, or kind of where do you kind of see the Buckeyes fitting into this?
I think I kind of underestimated where Ohio State was in this one. I mean, I come into the visit, I didn't really give them much of a chance. I think the fact that he's visiting in November, for a game against Indiana tells you that there was sincere interest. Nobody comes to Columbus, Ohio in the middle of November in, basically snow against a crappy opponent to just for fun. If he was coming for the Michigan game, I'd say, okay, maybe he wanted to be in the big game atmosphere, but that was a good sign for me. And then I think just the feedback, I spoke to Arion a little bit after his visit. He was just raving about it. He had an awesome time. He was very, very impressed. But I think in talking to some sources, maybe on the Ohio State side of things, as well as a couple high school coaches down in Tennessee that I think are very familiar with what's going on in this recruitment, that have kind of been giving me some information along the way. I think that Ohio State's a legitimate player here. I think they are number one. I still think Bama is the favorite, especially they have their official visit. I think it's going to be like that December 10th weekend. So I think with that official visit and having already 2 unofficial visits that he's taken there, I still think Alabama's the favorite. But I think Ohio State made up a lot of ground. I think he would have, if signing day was tomorrow, I think he would struggle a little bit. I still think Bama would be the pick, but I think it would be a little bit of a struggle between Ohio State and Bama. So I have Ohio State running 2, but he's at Auburn this coming weekend. I think he's going to Tennessee the first week in December, maybe. And then I think he's in Alabama the week after that. So I know Michigan's been mentioned. I don't see him going to Michigan or Auburn. I think it's Alabama, Ohio State, Tennessee in that order. I think Ohio State's done as good a job as they possibly could here, but I don't know. I think the kid's going to stay in the South and go to Alabama. That's just my take.
Yeah, my pick would still be on Alabama coming out of the weekend. Although, you start to hear, how things went and talk to people who, kind of had a pulse on the visit, and everything seemed to go as well as it could have. It looks like a kid that wants to go to Alabama, though, and is almost looking, for every reason to go to Alabama. And, I had one interesting thing kind of dropped on me a week or 2 ago was, is Alabama in position to take Carter? They've got a lot of irons in the fire there in their defensive front 7. That was at a point when I think he was initially going to visit Alabama. Now, he's been to Alabama a couple times. He's made a few unofficial visits there, but his official at one point was going to be Thanksgiving weekend, rivalry week. Now it's, as you're reporting, it looks like it's moving 2 weekends back. That really, when you start putting this puzzle together, that really fits with what I've been told the last few weeks, which is Alabama wants to make sure there's room. Alabama wants to see how some of these other situations are playing out. If Alabama, if this was top, priority, have to have him, I don't think Alabama would have kicked this to December 10th. I think this visit would have happened. They've had him on officially on campus. I don't know. Something feels off with Alabama right now, which is the only thing giving me pause from saying it's definitely going to be Alabama. That's kind of the one thing that's giving me pause, is just how this is timing up. And I'm a little bit surprised, as you kind of alluded to, I'm a little bit surprised that I think Ohio State's ahead of Tennessee right now, which surprises me a little bit. But at the same time, I think, it's one thing for Ohio State or Alabama to be late on a kid from Tennessee. I think it's another thing for Tennessee to be late on a kid from Tennessee. I think there may be a little bit of a, it's one, Alabama, Ohio State, whatever, but why is the in-state school just now picking up the heat there? So that may have hurt them. Maybe I'm a little confused by Tennessee seeming to not be able to gain more traction here. But that's kind of, been another interesting factor of it for me. But yeah, I agree. I think Alabama's gonna be tough to beat here, but again, it makes me wonder, could Alabama, lose this to Ohio State over, maybe being a little indecisive? You wonder if that could happen. And it definitely looks like Ohio State played the visit well. Kid reminds me a lot of Steel Chambers, for what it's worth. Very decorated high school running back who, could be a college running back, but he's a more unique talent on defense. And I understand why all these schools are starting to get after him now. But so that'll be an interesting one to watch. Yeah, I'm with Alex. I think Ohio State's a little bit more in this one than maybe we thought a couple weeks ago, and we'll see what happens for the next few weeks. Speaking of someone who we're going to be watching here the next few weeks, Damon Wilson, 5-star pass rusher, seems locked in on this Ohio State return visit for the Michigan game. Again, I've written about this. We've talked about this. Every time he goes somewhere or interacts with some coaching staff, immediately that school starts to feel confident, but says, will say something along the lines of, yeah, but, this needs to happen soon. This needs to happen quick, or it could go, it could flip back to the other school. Here we go again. Georgia was feeling a little confident, I think, coming out of a recent on a return visit that they got from Damon Wilson. And all the buzz was, well, if he decides this week, it's going to be Georgia. Well, he didn't. And now he's you're never locked into a visit until you step foot on campus, but he seems pretty locked into this unofficial visit to Ohio State now in a week and a half when they host Michigan. So, Alex, good news, great news. How are we digesting this right now?
I will say, if he were it's great that he scheduled a visit. He's confirming the visit. Let's see him get off the plane, show up to Columbus on his own dime. I don't know if it's going out on a limb here. I think if he does that, I think he's going to be a Buckeye. I think you and I both have felt that I thought he was going to be Ohio State for a while. That last Georgia visit kind of threw me for a loop, but hearing that he was also planning on coming back to Columbus and then, having him come out and say that and seeing him actually show up, I think that that's where he'll end up at Ohio State if he does indeed make this visit. If he doesn't make this visit, I'm not saying it's over. I mean, look, it's money. It's, there's logistics, there's things that happen, right? It doesn't mean he's not coming to Ohio State, but I would feel really good about him coming to Ohio State if he does make it to this visit as planned.
And the sooner he announces after that visit, the better for Ohio State, right? We've played
1,000%. That's
that road before, but and then you could have in-homes after that. I think it's trending that way a little bit with Damon. I think it's trending toward Ohio State and Georgia. Kirby and Ryan Day both getting a chance to sit down in the living room and make the final pitch. I think it's really trending that direction right now. But I still like my Ohio State pick there. And like Alex mentioned, I don't need to harp on it too much, but like Alex mentioned, I will like my Ohio State pick a little bit more if he does in fact show up for the Michigan game, which we're all expecting him to do at this point. So we'll see. Again, this one's going to drag a little longer than initially thought, but again, Damon's one of those kids that wants to be sure. He's not a game player. I think if he was pretty locked in somewhere, he'd probably have decided by now or announced by now. So that gives me a little pause as well whenever you've got to pick on someone and the trigger's not being pulled. But, we'll see. Like I said, I think Ohio State's done everything right in this recruiting process with him. And I think they've got the ultimate sales pitch of the jack position and just not having a lot of guys who fit his particular skill set on the current roster and on the roster moving forward. So I think they're playing this well. I think Larry Johnson has a great relationship with the kid, and see what happens. Keon Keeley, who has been even more quiet than Damon Wilson the last few weeks. Alex, where are we at on that?
He's a real hard kid to read. I mean, he's giving, I'll say this, behind the scenes, he's definitely giving people on the Ohio State side, I don't want to say super positive vibes, but vibes that he's still undecided and that Ohio State very well could be the pick. That said, I'm deciding how much I want to dive into this and and divulge things, but I just think that there's some factors in this recruitment that are going to lead it to end up being Alabama. Although I do think from a personality standpoint and probably even from a schematic standpoint, Ohio State is the better fit. But I just think that I don't know why. I just think it's going to be Alabama. But I do think Ohio State's a very realistic option. I wouldn't say that we're going to look back on this and be we were stupid. It was Alabama the whole time. I think there's good reason for Ohio State to still have a sliver of hope in this one that, that they could get him. I don't know if he has any visits planned or not. I know there's been some murmurs of people trying to get him up to Columbus next weekend. If that happens, that would be huge. But let's see what happens. I mean, let's see what visits he has. I'm guessing this is going to be a signing day decision with a little bit of drama and all of that. Not that he's a game player. I don't think he's a game player, but I think now at this point, that's just probably what it's leading to. So I really don't know what to say, but I guess my pick would be Alabama as of today, although that could change quite quickly.
Yeah, I'm still on Alabama for Keon. I will say this. I think, we've talked about, it's almost become a running joke with Damon Wilson as far as the sooner he commits, the better it is for, this school or that school. I do think Ohio State would improve its chances by having this go the distance.
I agree with that.
I think in-home visits, I think you want all the in-home visits. I think that's where they're at right now, where if he decides, in the next next 2 weeks, let's call it November. If he decides in November, I don't think it's going to be Ohio State. But you get Ryan Day down there in the living room, you get Larry Johnson in the living room. These guys have done wonders on these in-home visits over the years. Maybe you sway whatever it is, if it's family members who are maybe thinking it should be Alabama, maybe you can sway somebody, maybe you can sway something. Maybe that's enough to tip this. I think if you're Ohio State right now, you want every opportunity with Keon possible. I don't think you're necessarily rooting for the quick I said quick. It's been quite a long time, but I don't think you're rooting for a decision soon. I think in fact you are hoping this goes well into December, but we'll see. As much they're not a lock to get Damon Wilson. They're not a lock to lose Keon Keeley. These things could flip, but that's kind of where I've got it right now too. It's been interesting because there's a couple of pretty good senior running backs in Ohio. And while I know Ohio State's, looked at some film and done some homework, they have not really pushed for either one. Trey Cornish out of Cincinnati Winton Woods, Jacquez Keys out of Ironton. Both guys are either already decommitted or are flippable. Ohio State, I think, again, largely out of respect for Mark Fletcher, has not really dove too deep into those guys at this point. They're going to have to start doing that. If it's not those two guys, out of state options, coaching carousel will start spinning soon. It's been weird this year. I don't know if it's because it was so crazy last year that there's only so many schools that actually make moves right now because of buyout situations, because so many moves happened last year. But it's been a little slower this year to get started, but it will pick up. Things will happen here. and especially with position coaches moving around. So, yeah, I think for the first time, really, they're going to have to be serious about Plan B in the event that they don't get Mark Fletcher. I just don't think they've been that concerned about it up until very recently.
And I don't think they want either of those Ohio guys as the sole back in the class, but maybe at this point, right, instead of holding off on taking a second back because they wanted to let Mark Fletcher be the guy, maybe they say, like, Mark, like, we got to take one of these guys because we need insurance. We can't have 0 running backs in this class. So right, if nothing else, we get Trey Cornist is my guess on who it would be probably. Mm-hmm. I know that I asked a few weeks ago, like, anything with Trey Cornist when he decommitted from Georgia Tech. And I was basically told, like, almost like a 99% no, that's not happening. But I think that would be a very different conversation today if I were
we live in a much different world than we did 2 weeks ago. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm with you. I wouldn't be shocked if they took one of those guys as insurance and said, we're going to have a 2-back class, or we're going to try to have a 2-back class, whether it's Fletcher who signs or it's, Justice Haynes. Like, if there's I don't think they're going to get Justice Haynes, but someone like that, or, I know Ruben Owens has been thrown out, Louisville, Scott Satterfield. Is he on the hot seat? Maybe not this year, maybe next year. I know he's probably getting a nice NIL deal from them, which is why he went there from Texas, but maybe he sees the value of, for my NFL future and with a new head coach, like, maybe I end up going somewhere else. I don't know. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting.
And then there's the portal. If they can't piece this together in the next few weeks, there's always the portal. So that'll be interesting as well. Right now I don't know how. I mean, you can't take a 0, right? I think you probably almost have to take 2 because we don't even know what they're going to have back next year from this roster. It would seem to be in Mayan Williams' best interest to test the NFL after this season.
Yeah. I mean,
the knocks that are going to be there on Mayan aren't going to go away. Like, he's not going to.
He is who he is.
Yeah. And he's been very productive this year.
Why get hurt another year and banged up another year and waste miles? And then, is Evan, like, I think if Mayan goes, Evan Pryor clearly has an opportunity to have a big role on this team. But if Mayan stays, does Evan Pryor look to go? Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. Or is he patient? I don't know.
Right. It definitely, if Henderson and Williams both come back, there could be some impatience, there on the bottom of the running back depth chart. You just never know. But so they've got to address this. But the last guy we want to talk about here is, we talk about all these other defensive ends, but here comes Joshua Mickens. He's a borderline top 100 prospect. So this is not a 3-star Plan B late bloomer guy. This is a borderline top 100 prospect. LSU commit out of Indianapolis, Lawrence Central, makes an unofficial visit. Looks like they could be getting him back for the official here for the Michigan game, possibly. Alex, you wrote about this a lot on the A deck on BuckeyeHello.com, which everyone should be subscribing to and reading. Where do you see Joshua Mickens fitting into all this?
Everyone, their first reaction was, well, they must not be getting, one of the big 3 defensive ends they're after. I'm not going to say this isn't related because all the puzzle pieces fit in, but I think this was an independent evaluation. This is a kid who's been at camp. He's been on visits. He's been on their radar. And I think they watched the senior film. They really like what they saw. They probably put some feelers out and got the feeling that there could be interest in at least exploring Ohio State as an option, even though he's been committed to LSU for a little bit. And I think, once he showed up on campus for the unofficial visit, it was very clear where his interest level was. They extended the offer because they felt he's good enough to play at Ohio State, nothing to have to do with anyone else. And now they're trying to set up the official visit for Michigan next week. And he's supposed to take that visit. If it actually happens, I think he's flipping to Ohio State. I think, playing for Larry Johnson, playing closer to home, not that there's anything wrong with LSU, just the opportunity to stay closer to home and play for a brand like Ohio State that's going to be competing for Big Ten national championships every year, where your parents can drive 2.5, 3 hours every single weekend to watch you play, is just a situation that probably appeals more to Joshua. And I think the question I said in A-Deck is, would they take all 4 of these guys if they wanted in? I think the answer is yes. but that scenario is probably not very realistic, as we discussed earlier in the show. So I think they would take for sure up to 3 defensive ends. So if Keon Keeley does go to Alabama and they could get the other 2, they'll absolutely take Mickens with those guys. I think it's right now, those 3 things are still up in the air. They could get all 3. They could get 2. They could get 1. They could get none. So you have a bird in the hand on a kid you absolutely think can play at a high level at Ohio State. You got to go after him. And I think that they are going to get him. That's my opinion.
Yeah. We talked about this for a while. They have room for 3. They're turning over a lot of their defensive line from the last 2 years. There's a lot of turnover. They lost a couple guys. We don't really talk about this that much, because they're not guys who are maybe impact guys at the college level at this point, but they've lost guys through the portal as well. I mean, they're not just, they've lost, not just graduating guys, putting them in the NFL, Jacoby Cowan transfers, Darian Henry transfers. The numbers aren't, the quality is fantastic. The numbers are not great. We talk about this a little bit with wide receivers. Like, well, why is Hartline, taking like 4 more next year? It's, well, because they only have like 6 now. They're all really good, but they only have 6. Same thing at defensive end, and what they have is really good, but Zach Harrison's going to be gone. Tyler Friday's going to be gone.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Javonte Jean-Baptiste could be gone.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's 3 guys from your rotation right there.
And then JT and Jack could leave after next year.
Exactly. So you are in a position to load up right now. And so I think, again, is there a bit of an insurance factor at play here? Sure. But I don't think Ohio State has the same questions we have, which is, they're in it for all 3 of those guys. Are they actually get all 3? Like, that could be tough. That could be a tough task. I think 2 out of 3 is still the sweet spot right now for them. I just don't know if they're going to get all 3. And so this would allow you, and again, we're not talking about, it's not a 3-star kid that you're flipping from Illinois or Purdue at the end of the cycle. This is a big time kid. It's a borderline top 100 guy, 6'5", 225, really, kind of prototype DN frame. So this makes a lot of sense to me. And I don't think it scares anybody off. I don't think Keon Keeley and Damon Wilson are making decisions solely on depth charts. I think it's something they look at. I think especially with Damon Wilson, you can sell this jack position. But I think you're looking at other factors there. So I don't see them as being scared off by this. And the way Ohio State generally does things is they'll tell them, like, look, we're taking 3. They did this with the running backs. Now, of course, that's seems to have. I don't think it's playing it with Mark Fletcher at all, because they ended up kind of scrapping the 2 thing. But they are not afraid to tell guys up front, like, yeah, you're not going to be the only guy we take here. Like, we're going to take 2 or 3 more of your position. So I don't see much downside here. And again, if they can pull these other guys, they can pull them. I think Mateo's kind of a flex anyway. I think he's a potential interior guy, or at least an interior pass rusher. And you can kind of, play him inside, outside based on situations, personnel, down and distance, opponent, etc. So makes all the sense in the world to me. We'll see what happens. Again, kind of a similar situation to some other guys. If he shows up on the 26th, game on, right? I mean, that's got to be how it's looked at. So
next week's going to be big.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be really big. Just final thought. Anything on Caleb Downs? I have kind of a thought here, but Alex, any inclination on your end that Caleb Downs will actually visit Ohio State next week for the Michigan game?
I'll tell you this. I checked with someone on the Ohio State side last night, and I can tell you that there's still a chance. Caleb is not saying he's not visiting. He's not saying he is visiting. I think the feedback is I'm still trying to figure it out, but there's been communication between Ohio State and Caleb Downs consistently for a while, and that continues. And so they're obviously hoping to have an answer, sometime within the next week or so. But again, another guy, if he shows, that's a big deal, because he's supposed to go into the Iron Bowl where he's committed to Alabama. So I think let's keep our eyes and ears open. I'm hoping that the person I'm talking to continues to give me almost real-time updates on this thing. And I'll certainly be snooping around. I know you will as well, Mark, and I'll keep asking Caleb, who's kind of gone a little silent, but I think there's a chance. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. You're telling me there's a chance.
Yeah, I think so too. Here's what I think will happen if he visits. I don't think there will be any public word of this until at least the day before the game. I don't think he's going to come out on Sunday or Monday and be like, hey, I'm going to Ohio State this weekend. Because now he's got 5 days of pressure from Alabama, 5 days of every reporter in the country texting and calling him, looking for the story. Possibly people showing up at the school looking to get the interview. And I think the way he handled the Georgia visit, that wasn't out. That was day before, right? I think when that came out. So I don't think we're going to hear anything until next Friday.
Probably good assumption.
I think there's a real chance he makes the visit. But I agree. I don't think he's going to come out and say that until at least next Friday. Or my God, I don't think he showed up on Saturday. He might just show up.
Yeah, I was going to say he's not the type to come out and like squash things either. But I wouldn't be shocked if like he spoke to an Alabama reporter and was like, "No, I'm going to the Iron Bowl. I'm not going to Ohio State." Because he's definitely being asked those questions. So the fact that he's not doing that, I think, also gives you hope too, right. Him or his dad. But I agree. We might have Tom Moore taking pictures of recruits on Saturday morning and saying,
I might get a text on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. from Tom Moore. That's Caleb Downs, right? With a photo. I'll be like, yep, that's Caleb Downs, Tom.
Could certainly happen.
Yeah. So we'll see. Stay tuned. Going to be a big week of coverage at BuckeyeHuddle.com as we piece together the visitor list. We have a running visitor list on the message board for our subscribers. We'll continue to update that. We'll continue to update what we're hearing on these guys as we get closer to that game for visits, and as well as other guys who aren't visiting who are still on the radar. So make sure you check that out. Like I said, Alex wrote a great ADEC piece here that went up on Wednesday morning and got a lot of jam-packed information on a lot of the top remaining targets. So feel free to check that out. And I will have a skull session up here pretty soon, and it may even be up by the time this podcast goes live. So be sure to check that out as well. And again, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.